It was the kind of morning that promised nothing unusual. Birds stirred in trimmed hedges, sprinklers whispered across perfect lawns, and the rhythm of American suburbia played on in quiet repetition. Yet behind the curtains of one ordinary home, something monstrous had been breathing for months. An empire built not in jungles or border towns, but beneath the very rooftops where children slept. When the engines came, they came without warning. Black, armored, deliberate. And within moments, the calm heartbeat of a Los Angeles neighborhood was replaced by the thunder of a federal invasion. That single raid would peel back the illusion of safety and expose a war no one thought was this close to home. Asterisk. At precisely 0630 hours, the stillness of a quiet Los Angeles suburb fractured under the growl of armored vehicles, rolling through tree-lined streets that looked more like postcards than battlefields. Morning light bounced off white fences. Bicycles leaned casually against mailboxes, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass and wet concrete. To the untrained eye, it was a neighborhood wrapped in innocence. But inside one of those identical homes, a federal task force sat poised on the edge of a moment that would redefine the front line of America's hidden war. Through the comms came a calm, directive-measured, surgical, execute, search warrant. Breach on my mark. What followed was an eruption of motion. A single word, mark, and the front door imploded in a shower of splinters. Agents from ICE, D, and a local tactical unit poured through the entryway, their breathing muffled by protective respirators, visors glinting under ceiling lights that flickered with the concussion of impact on inside. There was no family breakfast waiting, no startled homeowner clutching a coffee mug. What they found was something far colder, an industrial complex disguised as domestic normality. The living room had been transformed into a pill-pressing assembly line, rows of gleaming machines, belts, hoppers, and molds thrumming with chemical dust that hung in the air like fine ash. Plastic drums labeled in Mandarin and Hindi were stacked to the ceiling, their contents potent enough to poison entire blocks. What looked like sugar on the kitchen counter was fentanyl, residue so concentrated that a few grains could end a life. As investigators advanced, every room told the same story, an illusion of ordinary life constructed to hide a factory of death. That morning raid yielded evidence of an operation, capable of producing thousands of counterfeit prescription pills every hour, each one stamped, packaged, and ready to infiltrate legitimate supply chains. The chemical precursors traced back to suppliers overseas, and the packaging matched seizures from earlier cartel busts along the southern border. But what stunned investigators most wasn't the scale, it was the location. This wasn't the desert, nor a distant border town. The cartel had moved into the heart of California. The war had crossed the fence line hours after the breach. The hum of helicopters faded, leaving behind a neighborhood dazed by the surreal. Reporters gathered at the perimeter. Neighbors whispered behind caution tape. And inside the Joint Drug Enforcement Center, analysts began threading data from a dozen simultaneous raids across the Los Angeles basin. Each site mirrored the other. Ordinary facades, identical equipment, identical chemistry. Together, they formed a lattice of hidden industry and invisible web stretching through the suburbs. Federal documents later would reveal the scope. 8 tons of narcotics seized, 400 firearms confiscated, more than $11 million in cash stacked and cataloged. Every thread of evidence pointed to a single name, the Sinaloa Cartel. Yet, the discovery brought no celebration. It brought a question. How long had the enemy been living next door? In briefing rooms lit by the blue glow of monitors, analysts traced shipping records, customs entries, and satellite data. Their conclusion was chilling. The cartel wasn't just importing drugs anymore. It was manufacturing them inside America's own infrastructure. Shipping containers misdeclared as industrial solvents slipped through ports. From those containers came the lifeblood of dozens of microfactories scattered across California's suburbs. Each one functioned like a miniature production plant, self-contained, invisible, efficient. There was no need for smuggling routes when the supply chain began and ended on U.S. soil. Families who waved at neighbors each morning never guessed that behind the garage walls next door, toxic fumes were venting through hidden ducts, masked by air generators rumbled behind fake storage units, and children's toys were left purposefully in yards to complete the disguise. The line between safety and danger had evaporated. Inside federal briefings, the mood turned somber. Fentanyl, already the deadliest synthetic drug in the country, accounted for nearly 70% of overdose deaths nationwide. The new California labs represented an evolution, production moving closer to the consumer base, shortening supply lines, multiplying profit margins. One analyst summarized it in a single sentence that would echo through later reports. They've stopped smuggling poison, they're manufacturing it here. Asterisk, but narcotics were only the surface. Each shipment uncovered dual-use materials, counterfeit seals, and forged pharmaceutical labels. It resembled not a criminal ring, but a multinational enterprise with spreadsheets, logistics, and offshore accounts. What truly alarmed the task force wasn't the chemicals or the cash, it was the money trail behind them. Financial analysts began mapping transaction flows and uncovered a labyrinth of shell corporations linked to underground Chinese banking networks. Millions of dollars circulated through California real estate holdings, vehicle imports, and cryptocurrency exchanges. The quiet suburbs had become nodes in a global web of profit. By sundown, agents realized the Los Angeles raid wasn't an end. It was a warning. The front line of America's drug war had shifted inward. The enemy wasn't crossing the border anymore, it was already home. By the time the sun dropped behind the Los Angeles skyline, the command center's walls glowed red with data. Routes, manifests, purchase orders, every line, another vein in a living organism pulsing beneath the city. Analysts called it the web, but Morales, the operations lead, preferred a harsher truth, an organism that learned faster than it could be hunted. What began as a single suburban raid now widened into an ecosystem of deception. Each lab, each warehouse, each courier route was a neuron firing in perfect coordination. Through the night, analysts matched fingerprints, chemical signatures, and serial numbers. Patterns emerged like constellations on the monitors, California at the center, Mexico and China orbiting it in perfect, sinister geometry. Freight records told the story better than any confession. Shipping containers arriving from Asia were misdeclared as industrial solvents. Their real cargo, precursor chemicals used to synthesize fentanyl and methamphetamine. Once inside the ports, the loads were broken down and redirected to innocuous addresses, auto parts depots, cleaning supply firms, even charity warehouses. The chemicals vanished into suburbia, reborn as counterfeit pharmaceuticals. The cartel had stopped running across borders. It had learned to breathe through the arteries of American commerce. When agents raided a second cluster of houses in San Bernardino County, the illusion repeated itself. White fences, swing sets, patio grills, and behind them, chemical chaos. Hazmat teams moved through clouds of particulate so dense their visors fogged from within. A single mistake, a gloved finger brushing the wrong residue, could have been fatal. Yet what unsettled them more than danger was precision. Every pill press was calibrated, every label printer aligned. The network wasn't improvising, it was manufacturing. The houses were not hideouts but microfactories feeding a continental demand. Morales watched the live feeds in silence. He'd spent decades chasing traffickers who hid in mountains and deserts. Now he saw their evolution unfolding in real time. It's not smuggling anymore, he murmured to the room. It's supply chain warfare. The phrase would later headline internal memos and congressional briefings. For the first time, America's logistics strengthened. Ports, highways, and freight systems had been weaponized against itself. The next morning, financial auditors arrived with their own revelation. A spreadsheet recovered from a seized laptop listed transfers between California shell companies and Chinese underground banks. Tens of millions moved in perfect circles, cash converted to cryptocurrency, rounded overseas, laundered through property purchases, then returned as clean capital to finance the next chemical shipment. On paper, it was just commerce. In reality, it was the circulatory system of a global narcotics empire. Surveillance footage added faces to the numbers. A courier exchanging a brief handshake in a Monterey Park parking lot. A van leaving lax with unmarked crates. A broker signing invoices in an office that technically didn't exist. When agents finally intercepted the courier, the man's briefcase held not drugs but a single encrypted drive. Inside were routing tables, digital blueprints of the cartel's internal ledger. The discovery changed the operation overnight. The enemy's reach, they realized, wasn't measured in miles but in networks. Court filings that would follow months later painted the scale in black ink. $50 million in illicit proceeds funneled through 20 for defendants, each one a minor cog paper owner, freight broker, accountant, but together forming an invisible machine that turned poison into profit faster than enforcement could intervene. In the evidence vault, agents stacked laptops and routers by the dozens. Each hard drive was another chapter in the story of how a cartel had learned to think like a corporation. Then came to find that shook even veteran investigators. A joint ICD inspection at Los Angeles International Airport uncovered cargo crates labeled industrial cleaning compound. Hidden inside were pill molds identical to those seized from the suburban labs. Laxa, Temple of Global Travel, had become an unwitting node in the Sinaloa supply chain. Aerial footage showed miles of containers sliding beneath sodium lights, each one a sealed secret. Morales stood by the window of the ops center, watching the city glow. "If this much poison can hide in legitimate commerce," he said quietly, "how much passes that we never see?" His report to headquarters that night called for expanded maritime and air cargo screening. Within weeks, the directive evolved into Operation Sentinel, a multi-agency campaign to choke the flow at its source. Customs, Homeland Security, and the Coast Guard fused data streams, building predictive models that flagged suspicious shipments before they left foreign ports. But even as seizures rose, so did overdose deaths. Enforcement could cut branches, not roots. The cartel regenerated faster than it could be dismantled. Each intercepted parcel was a reflection of the larger war one that traveled, not with smugglers or convoys, but with paperwork, invoices, and digital trade codes. At dawn, Morales returned to the command floor. From his vantage point, the city stretched in perfect calm, streets glistening after sprinkler mist, commuters merging onto freeways. Beneath that order lay the quiet hum of an invisible battlefield. Los Angeles wasn't just a city anymore. It was the test site for a new form of warfare where spreadsheets replaced gunfire and logistics replaced smuggling routes. And somewhere within that glow, the cartel kept evolving, rewriting its code for survival. Operation Sentinel began not with gunfire but with code. Lines of digital logic written in sterile cubicles became the first real weapons of the campaign. In an underground server room beneath DHS headquarters, analysts fused port manifests, airline cargo data, and financial ledgers into a single living map of American trade. The screen pulsed with color green for legitimate shipments, crimson for those that didn't fit any lawful rhythm. Each flash of red was a heartbeat of the enemy. Within weeks, the system exposed a pattern so intricate that even seasoned investigators paused in disbelief. Containers leaving Shanghai under unrelated company names all converged on 3 American ports within a 48-hour window, then scattered inland to the same distribution corridors that supplied groceries, auto parts, and medication. The cartel had hidden its traffic inside the bloodstream of everyday life. Cutting it out would mean surgery on the entire body of commerce. Task forces multiplied overnight. Coast Guard cutters traced vessels in the Pacific. Treasury officials combed cryptocurrency exchanges for phantom wallets. Local sheriffs trained in data analysis. Each new arrest revealed another layer of the machine shell companies that owned warehouses that leased to import firms that financed charitable fronts. The architecture of deceit was so perfect that even its builders might not have known the full design, but intelligence alone couldn't hold the line. The product, the counterfeit pills that mimicked legitimate medication, kept flowing through the postal system by the million. In Philadelphia, a mail sorting clerk collapsed after a package ruptured on the conveyor. In Chicago, an apartment fire exposed a hidden press beneath a child's bunk bed. The nation's neighborhoods had become extensions of the same battlefield that Morales stared at from his monitors. By midsummer, Sentinel evolved from analysis to action. Coordinated raids swept across 6 states in a single dawn hour. Helicopters thudded above desert suburbs. SWAT teams breached garages that smelled faintly of acetone and betrayal. Body camera footage would later show the eerie, quiet no shootouts. No shouting, just the steady hum of generators and the metallic rhythm of pill molds turning, even as the operators fled. The network's genius had been to remove emotion. It ran on algorithms, not allegiance. Morales walked through one of the seized sites, his boots crunching over spilled powder. "It's like raiding a factory that never sleeps," he said to the field commander. On a wall hung a whiteboard listing production targets in neat handwriting. 3 million units/week. The precision was corporate, not criminal. In that moment, the narrative of narcotics shifted again. America wasn't fighting gangs in alleys. It was contending with an industrial revolution of synthetic chemistry. Congressional hearings followed, broadcast live. Senators demanded numbers. How many arrests? How many seizures? How many lives saved? Morales sat under the fluorescent glare, describing servers full of intercepted emails, the shipping records of companies that technically didn't exist, the families who opened medicine bottles never meant for them. "We're not chasing smugglers anymore," he told them. "We're chasing systems." Asterisk, as pressure mounted, the cartel adapted. It decentralized, splitting into autonomous cells that shared formulas but not leadership. A raid in Texas might cripple production in California, yet within days a new lab would rise in Nevada, identical down to the serial number on the machinery. The investigators called it the Hydra effect. Cut one head, two more synthesized themselves. The struggle became mathematical algorithms versus algorithms, each iteration more sophisticated than the last.